The number one rule of the Hells Angel Code is always back your brothers. I learned that before I even became a member.
If you ask people on the street what Hells Angels are, some will say Harley Davidson bikers, some will say criminals, and some will say an honorable club with almost 80 years of history. So which one is it? Well, all answers are correct from a certain point of view.
The motorcycle club tries to live by as few rules as it can, but the rules they do have are vital to the survival of the club. This means that if a member breaks the most important parts of the code, there are severe consequences.
The Hells Angels Club started out in the 1940s, and as it grew, it became tougher. Let's explore some of the Hells Angels' craziest and most painful rules and the reason behind these. In 1948, World War II veterans created the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club, using the surplus of military bikes to their advantage. Initially, it was not much more than a men's motorcycle club and a pretext to fill up all that post-war boredom. Some call it peace, but for these veterans, it was hard to stay still after all that they've been through. Over the years, Hells Angels became a very exclusive organization with a criminal track record, a complicated hierarchy, and very tough rules.
The Hells Angels call themselves a club. The Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. There's charters, and within the charter, the chapter, the group, there's a president, a vice president, a warlord, which is in charge of weapons and retaliations and defense.
Here are some of the Hells Angels' toughest rules. The weight. First of all, it can take years to get accepted into Hells Angels. And it's not just the weight that's painful. You have to do all sorts of tasks to prove you can be trusted, putting yourself in harm's way for the group without even the promise of initiation.
In the biker gang, you start off very slowly. The first step is that you're an associate, which is you're just someone who's spending some time in the presence of the gang members. Once you build a relationship, the gang will ask you to hang around. Then after you prospect, ultimately, hopefully, you're doing that to become a full patch member.
There's a minimum of 365 days, a full year of work for the club before the chapter even considers you for membership. Then, if trust is finally established, the entire chapter meets and holds a vote. Only if all members vote you in, you get to be a Hells Angel.
If one member of that charter votes against you, your prospecting phase continues.
But even if you do make it in, the high expectations of you have only just begun. One for all.
The number one rule of the Hells Angel Code is always back your brothers.
Former Hells Angels President George Christie explained that this must happen in any context, including violent ones. In fact, sometimes this one-for-all rule is what leads to bloody encounters. In 1976, George was working to be initiated into the group when an outsider angered the president, Old Man John. John viciously attacked the outsider and looked at George to see his reaction. George had to prove that he was willing to cut the man's throat for John. Luckily, John was satisfied with George only cutting the man's jacket and kicked him out of the bar. But in some other cases, the boss wants to see if you're willing to kill to keep the club intact. Snitches get stitches. As in many such organizations, Hells Angels punish rats most severely. Hells Angels have a very strict code of silence. No illegal business talk during meetings, and no talk about the group with outsiders. Hells Angels is not officially a criminal organization, but some members do murder people, and when that happens, it's almost always a rat. And here's the thing, Hells Angels don't trust other people. They don't even trust their own brothers, as they're always on the lookout for rats or people with ill intentions.
When you meet a Hells Angel and you got your sunglasses on, you better lift your sunglasses up and look that person in the eye. That member wants to see your eyes. I was told if I had riding gloves on, you better take your riding glove off when you shake hands with a Hells Angel.
Everyone else has to respect the Hells Angels, but they don't have to respect anyone. Men only. One of the Hells Angels' toughest rules is painful to all women out there, as they are completely forbidden from joining the club.
With regards to women, there's old ladies who are the wives or girlfriends of members, and they're off limits. You better not get caught trying to mess around with a member's wife or girlfriend, because there's a violent price to pay.
Even though Hells Angels partners are urged to spend as much time with their husbands or boyfriends as possible, in the words of Sonny Barger, Hells Angels are male chauvinist pigs as far as women are concerned.
But there's also women who they move from member to member to member.
To make things worse, women are expected to keep quiet and look pretty and never touch their partner's sacred vests. Sheesh. The no touching goes for anyone who isn't a president or chapter leader.
Never touch a Hells Angels patch. Never slap them on the back. I made those mistakes and was reprimanded for it, was smacked for it on occasion.
The club comes first. One rule stands out when you join the Hells Angels. The group will be your first priority for the rest of your life. Your life duty is to serve the club, and that means anything from engaging in violent fights, securing illegal deals, and being on call to your boss 24/7. This also means you can't leave the club unless you have a very good reason for it. When George Christie announced his departure, he was declared out bad with the group. All of his former friends wouldn't speak to him, and some even targeted him for being an informant, which he wasn't.
I took my patch off and I folded it like a flag, and I looked around the room and I didn't see anybody I wanted to hand it to. And I laid it on the corner of the table. And I said, if anybody's got anything to say it now. And nobody said anything. It was very sad, very emotional. And I'll tell you, the walk from my chair, I always sat in a chair against the back wall. It was the president's chair. The walk from that chair to the door, the threshold of the door to let me out, was the longest walk I ever took in my life.
What's going through your mind, your heart?
I'm just thinking, man, there's no turning back now, George. You know, you made this decision. Foolishly, I thought that I would be able to go about my business. About a week and a half, I got a phone call from the new president of the charter. And he said, you know, we've been doing a lot of thinking, and we've decided to change your status. You're now out bad. You can have absolutely no contact with any club members, and they can't contact you in any way.
In the blink of an eye, he lost his entire family, as when you're a Hells Angel, the Angels are your only family. And when you're out bad, Hells Angels see it fitting to break into your house and take whatever they think is their property. This can be anything from your vest and motorcycle to any valuables they think you owe the club. Now let's talk about the criminal side of the group. Many Hells Angels will argue that they're part of an honorable club with a very strict code and a no drug policy, but many other accounts say otherwise.
My name is Jay Dobbins. I'm a retired undercover federal agent, and I infiltrated the Hells Angels. With all the hatred from me in that gang and from their supporters, they can take some satisfaction of that. They ran right over the top of me. All that battle damage, all those things happened, the failed prosecution, all that blood, sweat, and tears, they ran right over the top of me and kept going. I was just a speed bump.
From 2001 to 2003, the ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, led Operation Black Biscuit, meant to investigate the dark side of the Hells Angels. Jay Dobbins was part of the operation and was meant to join the Hells Angels as an undercover agent, but that was no easy feat. By now, you know how hard it is to become part of the club.
My false persona, I went by the name of Jay Davis. The gang members knew me as Jaybird, and I portrayed myself to be a gun runner, a debt collector. The Hells Angels don't have to actively recruit members. They want people that bring them value.
Jay didn't have to act as a gun runner for too long. Within weeks, the Hells Angels forcefully invited him to a meeting where they threatened him for doing illicit business on their turf.
So I was told that if I intended to keep doing that business, I had to come to their clubhouse and meet their members and basically have them sanction me to continue.
When he arrived at their Mesa clubhouse, he could already see the Hells Angels were not on the side of justice.
I showed up at the Mesa clubhouse and was greeted in the street by 4 or 5 Hells Angels. Some had guns, some had baseball bats. In Arizona, you can open carry firearms. And so I had guns that were exposed on me. Some of the members who were basically working as security told me, you can't bring your guns inside our clubhouse. That's not allowed.
Clearly, the Hells Angels resort to violence as the first way of solving things. It's not a last resort or an exception. With the rule that brothers always have to back brothers, it can easily result in a bloody mess. But Jay had to work for years climbing up the Hells Angels ranks to get a full extent of their criminal activity. The Hells Angels membership is a long, exhausting process, from hang around to chapter leader, and it's all emphasized in their sacred vests.
I was a hang-around for the Skull Valley, Arizona charter of the Hells Angels. So I had a black cut that had nothing but Skull Valley on the front. When you become a prospect, you get your bottom rocker, the bottom curved patch. So when I was prospecting, I got an Arizona bottom rocker. When you become a member, then you get your top rocker, the designator Hells Angels or whatever the gang is, and your center patch, which the Hells Angels is the death head.
Once Jay was finally an official Hells Angels member, he realized how much of the violence stemmed out of controlling territory. Just like in the case of drug cartels, the Hells Angels are extremely preoccupied with having as big a turf as possible. That way, only they can make money off that territory. Of course, money making in this context is closely intertwined with the selling of drugs and guns.
They're constantly trying to acquire territories of competitive gangs. The rivalry that I became most aware of or closest to was the Hells Angels rivalry with the Mongols motorcycle gang.
This is what Jay experienced in Laughlin, Nevada.
Some Hells Angels went down to Harrah's and started poking the tiger and got surrounded, and it was on. And it was every man for himself. The police response was massive. The Harrah's casino riot, the Morongo casino riot, the Twin Peaks shooting in Texas. Those biker clashes are taking place all the time. We typically don't see it or hear about it until it takes place in a public venue where civilians, where just common man citizens are involved in it.
It's a war that never ends because the Hells Angels were ambushed in Laughlin. They responded by attacking rival gangs at other locations. It was a bloody tit for tat that went on for years.
There were fights that I was present for, that I knew the rules. I didn't want to blow my cover, but at the same time, I didn't want to watch some innocent civilian get beat down. I would find the target of the beating and throw some legitimate punches on them.
Jay tried to protect the victim's head, all while punching them to protect his cover. But sometimes he was expected to do much worse for the gang. Remember the one-for-all rule?
I got a call from a Skull Valley charter officer. Get to the clubhouse right now and bring all your hardware, which meant bring your guns. I was told the Banditos are coming to Las Vegas. Las Vegas is our territory, and they have not requested a hall pass. We expect you to shoot them before they get the kickstands down on their motorcycle.
Jay was even told that he was being watched during the standoff. If he failed to shoot the Banditos members, he would be the one getting shot by his own brothers. This was a desperate situation.
I was able to get in touch with the case agent, Joe Slatella, and tell him what my orders were. Joe Slatella found this pack of Banditos, pulled them to the side of the road, and stopped them. So I showed up at the target location with the Hells Angels watching me, but the Banditos never showed up.
It was a close call, but Jay was already losing the trust of the Angels, so he had to enter the drug trade. Yep, the Hells Angels are deep inside the U.S. drug trade.
I would either receive or give narcotics and either receive or give money in exchange, all while being witnessed by a Hells Angels like enforcer, bodyguard. What they didn't realize is that the person that I was in the transaction with was another law enforcement officer who was playing the role of a drug dealer.
The bottom line, Hells Angels is divided into many chapters, and it's up to the charter just how illegal its members can get.
So there's charters that run a fairly clean business and that aren't involved in a lot of crime. There's others that are involved in narcotics trafficking, gun running, extortions, protection rackets. There's no payday or no salary to be drawn by being a member of the Hells Angels.
So some Hells Angels make money for selling cool paraphernalia. Some even do community service, but others are top dogs in the American criminal underworld. In the Skull Valley Charter, murder was not only acceptable, but recommended. Jay only became a member 2 years into the operation when he staged the murder of a Mongol biker.
I dug a shallow grave in the desert, took some Polaroid pictures of the murder. What they didn't know is that it was the ultimate scam. The murdered Mongol was a member of our task force that we had dressed up, concealed his face in the pictures, and then we'd used blood and guts from the butcher shop to create a murder scene, a crime scene.
The ATF ended up indicting 55 Hells Angels members. Jay obviously exited the group, but that's when he and his family started receiving death threats.
The Hells Angels held murder contracts on me. They were farmed to the Aryan Brotherhood. They were farmed to the MS-13 through the prison system. So all these people had their fingers on a murder contract for me. My family was in jeopardy. And in the summer of 2008, my house was burned to the ground.
It's worrying to think that the Hells Angels are connected to the Aryans and MS-13. Jay's house was burned to the ground. So while many Hells Angels argue that their tough rules are only a reflection of their clean code of honor, others see their rules as a reflection of their own toughness, a culture of aggressive masculinity where violence solves everything. Thanks for watching, you guys. What do you think about the Hells Angels and their painful rules? Do you know of any other Hells Angels stories? Write us a comment, and before you leave, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell button so you never miss a fresh episode. See you next time.